Hello, I am B from B's Intuition. This is my second channel, B's Spirituality. And we're gonna talk about a bit of stuff. This is actually my little mirror thing. It's supposed to be for like mechanics, but I use it to check if I'm recording, which I am, thankfully. I don't know why I'm holding it and wielding it. Oh my gosh, I always say yield. Wielding it. Okay, so the topic I really want to talk about today, especially with all of the chaos that's happening in the country currently and in the world at large, there is a lot of insanity. There is a lot of inhumane practices, and for those that are sensitives, it is a very difficult time to get through. And even if you're not just a sensitive, but you're also one of the targeted groups of the things that are taking place currently, yeah, it's a really hard time. But I guess that probably goes without saying. Especially if you are sensitive, you already know that. But I kind of want to share with y'all some of my personal coping skills, strategies, things that have helped me personally. Because again, this is not a channel for me to just like preach at you, tell you what you need to do, but rather just sharing with you what has personally helped me, and maybe you can get something out of it. Also, before I start this, there was a couple of things that I wanted to mention. There is graffiti behind the camera right now, or street art. Street art sounds gentrified, but graffiti sounds like it would be attacking a specific group of people and used to create stereotypes, if you know what I'm saying. But anyways, there is, you know, those spray painted designs, let's say. And this one looks like 555, and I don't think that's what they meant to put there. I think it's probably spelling something else out, but to me it looks like 555. And before I started recording, I looked at my phone and it said 444. So 444, 555 could be significant. Maybe it's a sign from spirit to maybe reassure you that everything is going to be okay. But also, there was this little interaction I had with a mosquito that was trying to come at me, and I have since put on some bug spray. Probably is expired bug spray because it's been in my bag for ages. But I felt, you know, it's so funny because I actually started to feel bad that I was shooing away this mosquito. And I feel like we can apply something like that to, you know, other things. Because I feel like as sensitives, empaths, whatever term you would like to use, sometimes it goes a little haywire, and sometimes we care a little too much. Well, yeah. Because everything in life kind of has to have a balance. We can't always, I don't know. It's kind of like we sometimes need breaks away from maybe certain types of media that are making our mental health worse, fear-mongering us. I personally have deleted TikTok a little while ago. Mostly it was for saving space on my phone, but ultimately I think it was a good call for me because TikTok is one of those things where it's kind of just like Russian roulette with your brain, right? It's like, is this gonna be a good one or is this gonna traumatize me? You know? It's like the Wild West over there on TikTok. You never know what you're going to see or find or uncover. Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah, so maybe for your mental health, maybe you should evaluate some sort of social media or some daily practice that you have incorporated that may not actually serve you and may hinder you / make your mental health worse. Those definitely could be things to consider for sure. Because I've noticed that without TikTok, one, I am way more productive because I don't just stare at my phone for a million hours and forget. Like, I can see how people kind of depend on TikTok as an outlet for escapism, but at the same time, I think it's important to keep in mind the Russian roulette aspect to TikTok, and that just because you think right now it's going to be a good distraction doesn't mean that you're going to feel any better when you're on TikTok or have just gotten off TikTok, right? So, I'm just using TikTok as like my personal example. You can apply this to anything like the news, like watching the news on cable, because that's a whole nother thing that I find very problematic in a lot of ways. But yeah, so when the mosquito was trying to come at me and I kept swatting at it, and then I saw it kind of landing on grass, and I felt kind of bad because I knew like it wasn't getting its meal or whatever. But I was in that moment, I was thinking of the mosquito and not my own safety, right? Because that there's a likelihood that mosquito could have bitten me and nothing would have happened, right? I would have been fine. Would have went on with my life with a slightly uncomfortable bug bite that would have gone away in a bit of time, right? But that's the best case scenario, right? Because there are mosquitoes that can carry a lot of diseases, right? So there is a reason why our instinct is to, get as far away from mosquitoes as possible, right? They kind of creep me out to an extent, but I feel like a lot of parasitic sort of insects and stuff, they kind of, I think it's probably based within our human instinct, these types of things that can, potentially hurt us. We kind of have this knee-jerk reaction / instinct to get as far away from those things as possible to avoid any disease spreading, right? Or contamination of disease or whatever. But yeah, so infection of disease, I think, is the better way to word that. But anyways, but I just thought about that, and I thought about how, as a sensitive, I have been in, relationships romantically with people that were not the best. And, it's almost like, it's like when you have empathy for somebody because you know their backstory and why they are the way that they are, or maybe you have a grasp of human psychology, or maybe you have been through things that were very similar to that person. So you have that empathy, that understanding, that sensitivity towards them. But sometimes those people use that against us, our love, our empathy, our feelings. And just because we have that empathy doesn't mean that it's always leading us in the right direction, I suppose, or to the direction in which we are safe, if that makes any sense. So another way to look at this may be trusting just everybody that you come across and never listening to your gut feeling or your intuition, right? Like, say you decided that you want to be nice to every single person that you ever come across, no matter how they treat you, no matter what kind of energy you feel from them, no matter how they treat other people maybe. You're just like, I'm going to be nice to everyone and I'm going to trust everyone. And then it's like, okay, but you trust the wrong person, you get led astray, things happen, you're in danger, you know. So like, there's a reason why we need to have limits, right? Limitations on our empathy sometimes. That's not to say that we shouldn't experience empathy. I think that it's a very normal and human and healthy thing to experience. And I also am a believer that a lack of empathy is not a flex, like certain groups of people like to say, or, you know, try to present themselves to be like, oh, I don't care about anyone. Well, good for you. You're like most people in this country right now. Like, do you think you're special because you lack empathy? Look at what's happening in this country and the world. Anyways, I digress. But I think that empathy can be such a beautiful and necessary thing, especially when it comes to invoking change. Especially during these types of times of tumultuousness and lack of empathy from people in power. Lack of sympathy, empathy, feelings, humanity, all those things. And I do feel like a lot of people either are lacking in empathy or, you know, those feelings of caring for your fellow man. They either lack them or they are repressing or suppressing them, those feelings. Because they either feel like this is not the environment that is conducive to those feelings, it's not helpful, or, you know, yeah, more than likely it's along those sort of lines of like, especially when we're in a period of hatred and discrimination and endangerment of specific groups of people. It is hard, you know, to exist in this timeline, of course. But I do believe that there are ways still that we can still hold on to hope, look forward to things changing. And I am of the belief, and I've mentioned this before in previous, I think it was the last episode I uploaded, about balance and how I personally think that balance is a very important thing. And I think it's kind of a rule of the universe, sort of like sort of like a rule of the universe, in my opinion, that there needs to be a sense of balance in order for things to function and flow smoothly and stuff like that. And I'm personally of the belief that there has been so much darkness that has been taking place that it is knocking that balance of the universe. It's definitely knocking it off balance. And in my opinion, nobody else has to believe this. This is just my personal opinion. I believe it's only a matter of time before there's a counter action to the darkness that is taking place right now. Because again, the scales need to be balanced. It's the way of nature, it's the way of life, it's the way of the world, it's the way of the universe. You know, we can't have darkness without light. We can't have sadness without happiness. And maybe that's something that can be comforting to some people out there. I was speaking to a friend earlier who has been really going through a hard time. And it was so interesting because I already was planning to do this video on this channel, and my friend kind of like, I don't know, I guess it was a sign from the universe, in my opinion, where they messaged me and kind of reminded me, like, they didn't know this. That's the other thing too. They had no idea that I had this second channel, I don't think. well, I've told them now, so maybe they're a new subscriber of mine. Hi. I don't want to say their name publicly just in case like they're uncomfortable with that. But if you're here, thank you for being here. I appreciate you, my friend. But anyways, where am I going with this? Yes, so I'll use her pronouns because sometimes I like to keep it vague by saying they, but she has been going through a really difficult time and struggling with, these feelings, like, and feeling hopeless in those feelings, right? Because it's like I have all these feelings. I want to do something that matters. I want to, fight against what's happening right now, and I feel so utterly powerless, right? Oh, yes, I think that was my initial point, was like her reaching out to me and talking about her difficulty that she's been going through. It kind of reminded me why I'm doing this channel, and I don't know, it was kind of weird, but cool at the same time, because I do think that it was Spirit's way of reminding me to stay hopeful, actually, because like sometimes, especially me, I always overthink everything. So even though I'm going into the idea of this channel, with a specific purpose in mind and, intention and whatnot, that still doesn't always mean that I don't doubt myself, or that, those thoughts start to creep up to the surface where I'm like, oh, like, is this actually important? Does the world actually need this? When I think it does. I think people need this right now. Some sense of hope, a sense of light in the darkness. Because I do think that there will be that counteraction, like I said, to balance out all of this darkness that is taking place right now. But the thing is, these types of things happen in divine timing, and in my personal opinion. And, divine timing is not always our timing, or the timing that we as humans are most comfortable with. But it's good to remember that things do happen in divine timing. Like, even if it's not happening right now, it will. And I feel like that can also give a sense of peace to an extent, knowing that things are going to change. They're not going to stay this way forever. And I also, it was interesting because I think it was more of a download. I responded to that friend, and there was a specific message that I was kind of sharing with her that I felt like was more of like a spiritual download than my maybe thoughts or something. Like, it's hard to explain, because it's like when I channel, it just flows very easily and I don't have to think a lot, if that makes any sense. Like, it just comes to me and I share it, and typically it's something, semi useful, I think, hopefully. But I'm trying to recall what I put in the message, but it was kind of along the lines of like, feeling this sense of being scared, being very depressed, sad, hopeless, that sense of seeing people suffer and feeling like you are unable to do anything to help alleviate their suffering. All of those feelings are super valid and normal, especially when things are happening as they are currently. So I feel like first and foremost, if you are doubting your empathy, or you're starting to think like, oh geez, I just wish I could take out my empathy and throw it in the garbage because clearly it's not doing anybody any good. I would like you to realize that, or maybe just reflect on that a little bit more, and maybe think about the ways in which empathy is a good thing and it actually does serve people and it can spark change, big changes. I do believe that now more than ever in this world, we need to hold on to our empathy for other people, our sympathy for other people, because empathy and sympathy are different. Empathy is when you share experiences with other people and you can really deeply relate to them and you feel for them in that way, whereas sympathy is when you don't really know what it's like to go through that specific circumstance, but you're still understanding that that was very difficult for the other person to go through. So even if you haven't personally gone through that experience, or maybe you're not specifically part of these targeted groups that are being mistreated, even if you're not, part of their culture, part of that community, you can still feel for them as a human being and understand that they are suffering as a human being to another human being, right? So empathy and sympathy, I think, really are so important to hold on to during this time. And if anybody ever tries to tell you that those feelings are useless, or, that they don't make a difference, or that means you're weak, or whatever, I would definitely suggest not listening to those people, because a lot of those people have either been brainwashed into believing that, or through their own life circumstances, they have been taught that in some way, to believe that that's true. Also, sometimes people just like to trigger other people just for the fun of it, because they think that's funny and fun, to get into other people's minds and fuck with them pretty much. So that's a whole nother thing too, is like some people just like to be trolls and they'll say shit that they don't even truly believe in at the end of the day, because it's like, the types of people that say like, oh, you're so weak for having empathy towards other humans, you're a little crybaby, or it's just like, okay, but say that person got into a car accident, for an example. I highly doubt they would say the same thing when it comes to the people that are breaking out the jaws of life to free them from this mangled up car. If they have that likelihood of survival, right? They're gonna want people to be real empathetic real quick. And they're not gonna think it's useless. They're not gonna think they're a bunch of crybabies. They're gonna be like, yes, please be empathetic or sympathetic to my situation right now, because this car is on fire, and if I'm not removed from it, I will die. So a lot of these people say this kind of shit, but they really don't truly believe it in their heart of hearts. And that irks me to an extent, but I also see, that's the thing with me, is like I personally see a lot of contradicting or contrasting points of view, which sometimes can lead me down a path of maybe being a little too empathetic sometimes, or a little too understanding sometimes, to my own detriment. But I think overall it's a pretty useful ability to, see both sides of the coin, both sides of the story, etc. But at the end of the day, I still personally have a moral compass that I like to adhere to. And I think most of us do. So no matter how well we understand why somebody is doing something really awful, we can still hold them responsible, even if we understand where they're coming from, right? And we should do that, right? especially when it comes to things that are just, straight up not okay. I do think that we are living through something very historical right now. I think that this is a very historical point in time. And I am genuinely fascinated or curious to know what the history books are going to say about this era that is happening right now in the present moment. Because I think that future generations are going to be looking back on what is happening right now with a lot of shame, especially people that are supporting these types of things that are taking place right now. I think that it's definitely going to be compared to a lot of other historical catastrophes. But anyways, yes, in the message that I sent to my friend, I validated their feelings and reassured them that that is normal, because I think sometimes we need to hear that, right? Because when you're surrounded by people that believe one thing and they don't see what's wrong with it, they don't see their own blind spots or the blind spots of the cause that they're supporting. It can feel like you're kind of like either that you don't have a place in that environment, or that because the status quo is a certain way and you don't align to that, that you are wrong or that you don't belong, all those types of things. And those are natural feelings to feel. But I would say that you do have a place. You are not built wrong. You are not wrong. Every human on this earth has a place here. But yeah, so I'm trying to think of what other things I included in that message, because I felt like it was actually a pretty good message that I was channeling. It was something along the lines of like, oh yes, these things such as empathy and sympathy and caring about your fellow man, these all right now feel useless. And I feel like that's only reasonable with what is taking place around us right now and what we're just enveloped / surrounded by. But yes, there will come a time in which these qualities, attributes, are going to be seen more so in a positive light. Also, these things can be our superpowers. Just because people call them a weakness doesn't mean anything. And that's a whole nother thing too, is not everything is black and white. Most things are not black and white, right? And so we have to see the shades of gray that exist, the other colors that exist, right? There's that dog that is constantly barking in the background, and every single time I am here, it feels like, and I'm recording, that dog is always barking. And so it distracts me from my messages, but that's fine. We gotta just roll with the energy, roll with the tide, so to speak. I do think that that is a useful skill to develop for sure. Being able to roll with things and kind of adapt when necessary. Not that that has anything to do with this message I'm talking about right now, but in certain situations, such as adapting to the fact that there is a dog constantly barking in the background that I'll just have to try my best to ignore during this message. But if I start to lose my train of thought, it's probably because I hear a dog barking in the background and it's distracting. But then again, I'm recording outside. I feel like that is something, this is an environment obviously that is not controlled. Like, it's not a controlled environment, right? Such as being inside and maybe in a soundproof room. So naturally variables will arise to create a non-ideal environment for recording. So I kind of take that risk naturally by recording outside. But I personally prefer being outside, especially in nature, because I find that messages typically come through much clearer when I'm in nature. So anyways, going back to that message, I do think that these things that right now are seen as useless are going to be seen as superpowers, and they are going to be recognized and validated. And I think that will come when that counterbalancing is taking place to balance the scales again. Because there's been so much darkness, I feel like that's going to be followed by a period of, and not to say that everything will be perfect in that period of lightness, but things will get better. And then the scales will kind of balance back out again. And I feel like that will be the period of time in which these feelings of empathy, sympathy, caring for your fellow man, those will be more maybe idolized to an extent. Idealized, I mean, not idolized. And more, recognized, validated as being like, yes, that's what's supposed to take place, right? It's usually the people in power that control the narrative, right? So if there's people in power that are non-empathetic, they're going to convince you that because you have empathy, you are wrong, right? And, when the scales or the tables turn, we are going to see the opposite, where it's like people in power are probably going to, talk about like, people with empathy, yes, this is the way, kind of thing. So, yeah. But yes, so it was like something along those lines of that there will be a time for us to shine. Us sensitives, us empaths, us who feel empathy, who feel sympathy, who care for our fellow man. We will have our time to shine pretty much. It's only a matter of time. And hoping for that and having faith in that can sustain us. And it will sustain us because we are so much stronger than we even believe ourselves to be. Humans are so capable of so much. And we just need to remind ourselves day in and day out that we have what it takes to get through this. So that's like pretty much the main point, I think, or main points that I made in that message. And I kind of felt like that was coming directly from Spirit, potentially. I smell weed in the background. I'm like, someone got weed? I do like the smell of weed, I have to admit. Anyways. Actually, I don't need to admit that here, but that'll be a little secret between you and me, okay? That'll be our little secret. Oh, and then there was the other thing that I wanted to mention as well. And I'm not even sure if this is the right way. And that's another thing too. Like, feel free. Well, if I say feel free to criticize me, I'm sure the whole comment section will just be filled with people that deliberately try to misunderstand me and deliberately want to argue against what I'm saying. If you are coming at it from a genuine place, you can definitely like feel free to give me constructive criticism on the things that I say. Especially if I'm talking ignorantly or hatefully or in an unenlightened way. But I'm sure certain people that are delusional probably will see whatever I say as being unenlightened. So I kind of have to tread lightly around saying stuff like that. Like, feel free to criticize me. And then it's like the whole comment section is just, go kill yourself. You are pointless. You suck. You know, whatever. But, whatever. I wanted to say, well, maybe it's more so that I just wanted to share a certain perspective that I have. One thing that spirituality, or my personal spiritual belief system, my own spirituality, has kind of led me to or influenced me with, or helped me to develop, is the ability to detach from things. And detachment is it's like a thin line, and it's kind of tricky to kind of navigate because it can so quickly switch to apathy instead of detachment. And apathy, in my opinion, is more of a numbness. Whereas detachment is like, you can still hold on to a sense of attachment, but separate yourself from that sense of attachment, if that makes any sense. And I know this probably doesn't make much sense the way I'm wording it, but from my perspective, detachment has helped me personally with like my own mental health, with managing feelings, overwhelming thoughts, overwhelming ideas. And, you know, dealing with all of the pain and the weight of the knowledge of what is taking place right now. But I feel like detachment has helped me in a lot of areas of my life personally. And there's a specific area in which I have grown this sense of detachment that I feel like will be quite controversial and potentially not a good idea for some people. So just because it works for me doesn't mean that it will work for everyone. I definitely am going to put that out as a disclaimer. But before I get into that, maybe I should share like certain more lighthearted ways of detachment, such as some people apply it to like relationships or manifestation. That's the one. A lot of people typically talk about detachment in terms of manifestation, so whether that be manifesting a relationship or a job or something. It's pretty much about like setting an intention and then detaching from the way it plays out. And that sounds so bizarre, right? Because that almost sounds like it contradicts itself. And it's kind of like, pretty much like, some people have worded it as in a way of like if you're putting in an order, you're like in a restaurant, right? You're sitting down and you order what you want from the menu, and the server's like, yep, that's coming right up, I will get that for you. And you're not, or typically I should say, I'm sure there's people out there that make it difficult for the servers, but most people would take comfort in that, like, okay, my meal is coming, it's just a matter of time. Maybe I don't know the exact time that this order will take place, or when it will finally come to me, but that's okay. I know that it's in the process, right? Or maybe I don't know all the specifics. Maybe a different server brings out the food to me and it's not the same one that took my order. That could be a possibility. Maybe like you ordered a side of fries and maybe the kitchen was out of fries and you had to come up with some sort of substitution. Or maybe there was, there's a bunch of variables that can take place in those types of situations. And so it's kind of important to kind of detach from what you want things to play out as. Because sometimes, and I would say maybe most of the time, when we hold so closely to things playing out in such a specific way that we plan down to the minute detail, like this is the way things should be, this is the way that I want them to happen. Typically things don't happen that way, right? Because that's kind of just a part of life. There's usually always variables that take place and can kind of interrupt our plans, right? So it's kind of about accepting that we don't know all the details of how things are going to play out, and that is okay. Because like the more we hold on to our expectations, the more we're going to be disappointed, the more angry we're going to feel, the more, there's just so much negativity that arises when we hold so closely to our expectations of something or how we want an outcome to be. So in that situation of like ordering something at a restaurant, if you were somebody that was like, okay, I expect my food to be this specific temperature, and if it's not this specific temperature, I'm sending it back. Or if a different server presents my food to me, I'm gonna be so angry. Or, if they run out of French fries, I'm never coming back to this place ever again, And it sounds ridiculous, right? But there are so many people that do that kind of stuff. I know people that do that kind of stuff. I'm just saying. But anyways. And I'm not saying like, oh, like you get a burger that's raw or whatever, or when you ordered it like well cooked or something. Like I'm not saying like anything when in relation to like food standards, safety standards, right? I'm just talking about like maybe that person wanted their food so piping hot that it felt like it was like opening the portal to hell or something. Like I'm just saying, like people that are way too specific about the things that they're expecting, they're more likely to get disappointed, they're more likely to be frustrated, angry, whatever, hysterical even. But sometimes it's not that big of a deal. And I don't mean in terms of food safety standards, but rather just, having things a very specific way. But yeah, so that's what I kind of mean by detachment, is kind of understanding that most everything that takes place in our lives, in the world, a lot of it we don't actually have that much control over. And that is probably one of the most frustrating things to experience as a human. But the sooner we come to that point of acceptance of that there are always going to be variables, there's always the likelihood that things are not going to turn out exactly the way that we want them to. Kind of when we accept that, or at least when I have come to accept that, I find it so much easier to roll with the tide kind of thing, where it's like, if I go to a restaurant and I did want a side of fries, but maybe they're out of fries, maybe they're out of regular potato fries, but they have sweet potato fries, and I love sweet potato fries. Or, maybe they have something completely different. Maybe they offer you a second dessert or something for free, or maybe just a dessert in general. Like it's like, here you go. Or maybe they offer you a coupon for free fries tomorrow or whenever you come back. There's, just because something doesn't work out in that moment the way that you wanted it to, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be like alternatives that align with what you want, or other benefits to navigating that situation, yeah, I think you understand kind of what I'm trying to get at there. But yeah, so we can kind of accept that there are going to be variables in most situations, that most things that we want to happen in a specific way more than likely aren't going to happen in the exact way that we're picturing in our mind. And that can be okay, because most of the time, the main things that we want, we can attract. And I know that sounds so bizarre, right? Because it's like, I was just talking about like how, unexpected things come up all the time, and we may not get exactly what we want, but like, it's like, say I'm trying to manifest, $1 million. And yes, yeah, let's go with that. $1 million. That's what we're trying to manifest. And so we can get that $1 million, but maybe the details around that $1 million are different than what we thought or what we expected, right? So maybe I say to the universe, I'm manifesting $1 million, but like, maybe that $1 million comes in during the whole course of my lifetime. Maybe all of my income eventually adds up to $1 million throughout my life. And I'm like, oh, okay, so technically I did get that $1 million, just not in the way that I thought. Or maybe it's like some sort of settlement when you're 80 years old and you're just like, wow, that's crazy. I got that, $1 million. And it's like amazing how, that it happened, and it happened in such a bizarre way that I never even saw coming, right? So it's kind of like that, where it's like, yes, we can manifest things, but sometimes it's good to just be loosey-goosey with it to a degree, where we're kind of like not holding on to a specific way of it coming into our lives. Or maybe like the way you pictured it in your mind was like, okay, this $1 million is going to come as a result of my social media presence, for example. And maybe it comes in a completely different way that you didn't even think of. And so it technically does come in, but it's in a different way, or maybe from a different source. And you're kind of just like, oh, okay, so I guess I got my wish, but it kind of didn't happen in the way that I thought it would. And that's okay, But yeah, so that's kind of the way in which I kind of have sort of found my own sense of detachment, I guess. Because maybe there's also different ways to have that sense of detachment. I'm sure like there's many different ways of doing that for different people, because we're all different. We all have different brain chemistries, life experiences, etc. But yeah, so maybe my form of detachment isn't the same as yours, or Susie down the street's way of detachment. I don't know. But yeah, so that's the general idea about manifestation and detachment as I have personally learned it for myself. But this is the part where I start to get controversial, I think, because, and maybe this is a slightly different type of detachment, and like, I don't want this to be like me saying that this is the right way to be, and you have to be exactly like me or whatever. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything like that. But more so just personally sharing what has personally helped me. But I'm gonna be, completely honest with you that maybe I don't know, personally, I don't really know if this is a healthy thing to do, or if it's a mentally sane thing to do, because I think I mentioned before in like maybe the first podcast episode that I have mental health issues, and one of those mental health issues is severe depression. I can't remember what it's called. Like the technical term. I think it's like, I don't know. I pretty much have depression that I get treatment for. So, yeah. Okay, let me just say the thing and then we can kind of put some details around it to kind of clarify. Life is one of those things where, like I said, we don't really have that much control over a lot of things in life. And that can be a very uncomfortable truth to find out, to learn, to experience, because a lot of the time our society convinces us a lot of the time that almost everything we do or experience or come across, that we have control over it. And the reality of it is typically that we really don't. And that's more of like sure, there are certain things we can control, such as ourselves, how we act, how we respond to situations, etc. So we have control over ourselves. But other than that, we don't really have that much control. And so accepting that could also be helpful to a degree. I personally have found that it's, although that was a very uncomfortable truth for me to face at first, over time it has given me a sense of peace, because it's that knowledge of like I kind of accept that a lot of things are outside of my control. And so, yeah, so, because like I said with the variables and how sometimes random things kind of just happen, right? And we don't really account for them. Sometimes nobody involved in that situation can foresee that that's going to be a possible issue. It just happens, right? Like you could literally make all of the plans perfectly super detailed and, really well thought out, and still have something go against what you took into consideration, right? It happens all the time. And so one of those things I think is life, for sure, but also, and this is where it's gonna get controversial, death. Death is something that can be, and I think it's mostly societal programming that kind of does this, is like death can be scary. And I think maybe inherently so to a degree, because it's like, I think that because we are human, we are in this human body, we naturally have, I think, a fear of death. And that kind of instinct, I suppose, is, it has served its purpose evolutionarily. Like, such as, like, if we see a dead body, for example, we are usually repulsed by it, and that's because of things like disease that can spread from a dead body to a live person or whatever. The idea of death is really scary because as human beings in a human body, our brains are programmed for survival, right? So when we think about ourselves dying, obviously that's a very scary thing that we experience. And I'm not trying to tell anybody to not validate those feelings when they come up or try to suppress them or whatever. But I personally have found a way to kind of detach when it comes to death. And maybe it's just for me specifically, because maybe I would be different if death happened to somebody that I cared for. But for me personally, I have a sense of detachment in the way of like, sure, I accept that because I'm a human being in a human body with a human brain and all that, I'm gonna naturally want to preserve myself and save myself and not die, right? Like I'm gonna have instincts, intuitions, and whatnot to protect myself, to keep myself alive, to avoid situations or whatever. And like I accept that is what this human experience is about. But I also understand and accept that life is unexpected and so is death. And I feel like that's maybe another thing is like a lot of media, and maybe just again social programming is kind of like, and especially with the way that technology is advancing, medical stuff is advancing, we kind of have, as a society in general, have kind of created like maybe a slightly false sense of safety. And I think part of that is because maybe we do need that sense of safety to just get through the day to day. But I think it also kind of separates us from maybe the reality, or at the very least, the possibility that things are not going to go the way that we want in terms of death. Or, you know, how we think we're going to die, I guess, you know? Because, like, I think most of us think of ourselves as, you know, oh, I'm going to die, but I'll be, like, probably, like, 100 years old in a hospital bed or whatever. But the reality is we don't really know how we're going to go, right? And that can be super scary. And I think because, you know, evolutionarily, we kind of need that instinct of being afraid of death, right? To preserve ourselves, to keep ourselves alive, to keep ourselves alive, yeah. But me kind of accepting or detaching when it comes to death for myself, because sometimes, and that may be personally why it has helped me, is because of my mental health issues, because I'm someone that also struggles with anxiety as well. So I've gone through periods of time that were, you know, borderline agoraphobic, you know, because like when we look at what's happening in the world, when we look at, you know, the news and like all of these horrible things taking place day in and day out, it's like, well, what if I'm caught in the crossfire of all of that, right? But the thing is, and this is where maybe the detachment comes in, or the truth of the situation kind of comes in, is when we I lost my train of thought. I don't even have the dog to blame this time. It's just me. Poop. Where was it going with this? There was a, oh, he's a doggy. But yeah. There was a point to where I was saying. Oh yes. Okay. So if we live in that state of fear about the future, or what could possibly happen, or all the ways in which we could die at any given moment, if we're always keeping that at the forefront of our brain, if we're always worried about going outside because literally anything at any point in time could kill us. And that's the other thing too. Just because you're inside, and I hope I'm not freaking out any people that are actually agoraphobic here, but you can die inside your house too. And you know, that sounds maybe harsh or whatever, but that's something that I personally had to kind of face, right? It's like, you know, we can take into consideration all of these possible variables and do whatever we can to avoid that scary moment of death, right? But I think most of us can kind of generally say, like, we don't ultimately have the say for how we go. And sometimes it can be literally just a freak accident as well. And it's like the temporary the temporariness, the valuable, is that a word? Like, this life is temporary, and we're not meant to live forever. But like, the thing is, there's also beauty in all of that as well. And maybe, I don't know, because like a lot of this, it's hard to kind of share these ideas without kind of directly relating them to my personal spiritual beliefs, because again, I'm not trying to project, or not project, but like, I'm not trying to convince anyone to have my spiritual beliefs, or tell you that your spiritual beliefs are wrong and you have to believe what I believe in order to be happy. Like, that's not the case. These are things that I personally have found helpful for me, and how my brain kind of works these things out. Pretty much what I was trying to say is like, we don't take full advantage of this short window of time of us being here in this life, being us, being human, experiencing the world, experiencing new experiences, if we are constantly worried about that, right? Constantly worried about death, constantly thinking about all the ways in which we're going to die or could die. And we can do everything possible to protect ourselves. We could literally go outside head to toe wrapped in bubble wrap, and we're thinking, ain't nothing gonna get me now. You're like all stiff, you're wobbling around, and you're like, I'm covered in bubble wrap, ain't nothing gonna get me. And then you die of heat stroke because you have too much bubble wrap on. Literally, that is life, right? And I'm not trying to sound condescending or talk down to anyone here, because I have been there where I've been terrified, like frozen in my anxiety and fear of the world, of life, of all of these things that we don't really have control over. We don't really know how things are going to play out. And that kind of takes me back to my spiritual practice of like, all we truly have is the present moment. And so, this is all going to sound so cheesy, I'm sure, but you know, the present moment is a present. It is a gift for us. And so the more we can stay grounded in our present moment in a positive way, because sure, sometimes we're in the present moment, but we're watching the news, right? And so it's like, yeah, you're probably not going to find peace in that present moment. But if you turn off the TV, go out in nature, you look at some trees, you look at some plants, you're like, wow, this is actually kind of pretty. You know, I'm starting to forget what I was worried about. You know, I start to forget, you know, what was I overthinking before I left the house, you know? There's so much, like, as much as there is darkness, as much as there is hate, horrible, ugly things taking place, life can also be just as beautiful. And it typically is just as beautiful as it is ugly. Take nature for instance, you know, like if I saw, because there's a lot of like cute little birds flying around, if a hawk suddenly flew down and took away one of those birds in front of my eyes, yeah, I would say that's kind of ugly, right? Like, that's not exactly peaceful. That's not exactly, you know, tranquil like the environment I'm in right now. But it's that natural balance of life, right? And you know, that hawk that took that bird still needs to eat, right? You know, hawks do serve in a lot of, you know, creatures that we typically see as like, you know, predators or whatever, birds of prey, etc. We don't always realize the important part that they play in the divine balance of nature. And, you know, they play a part in our ecosystems. And so it's really important for us to, even if they're not conducive with our own idea of what's peaceful or picturesque about nature, we can still accept that as a natural part of maintaining balance. I feel like, did I even make the point that I meant to make? Let me see. What was I saying? Oh yes, being in the present moment. Finding things that we can connect with in this present moment in a positive way. I feel like that is typically one of the best ways that I have personally found to find that sense of peace, even amongst chaos. And I think that it's really important to create a safe space within ourselves, that when life is being chaotic, it's being so insane, everything around you is on fire, like absolutely insane. But when we have that place of peace within ourselves, nothing around us can steal that away from us. Nothing can take that away from us when we have established that sense of peace inside of ourselves, and finding those things in that present moment to connect with in a positive way, to remind you, and sometimes that's the other thing too, is like we kind of have to counterbalance all of those negative thoughts, all of those stressors, counterbalance them with something positive. Like maybe we like to write in our journal, write poetry, write a story, write songs, not only are these things that are very beautiful and can help you connect with other people, can help create something to put into the world that is of value, but they can bring us peace in that current present moment that we have, right? So I think it's always good to kind of have a little bit of a tool belt, an invisible tool belt around your waist at all times, where you can kind of pull out, like, okay, it's time for me to journal, write a poem, or time for me to do my makeup, time for me to paint my shoes. That's a whole nother thing too, is like sometimes we can just do random shit and it can be fun. Like I could take a Sharpie to my shoes and spend hours, maybe just an hour, but spend a decent amount of time focused on my shoes, painting my shoes, and I don't even remember what the hell I was worried about earlier, and I mean, because like sometimes the things that are worrying us aren't even that big, are outside of ourselves. Sometimes we could literally just be stressing out about the dentist appointment that we have in the afternoon or something. Like sometimes we can get so carried away inside of our minds that it's just good to connect with something maybe super random, like painting your damn shoes, doing some random little silly little craft. And sure, maybe you could even feel a little bit silly in that present moment, being like, I'm really painting shoes when there is so much happening in the world that is so awful. But it's like, it's okay. Like these things can coexist in the same reality, right? Just because we're not focused on those horrible things happening all the time, that does not make us bad people. That makes us human. And also, if we are going to stay sane, stay human, we can't always be thinking about these awful things. Otherwise, we will be paralyzed with fear. We will be paralyzed in our own minds, our own realities, unable to make up our decision, like make a decision or choose what we want to do, or I think I kind of made my point with that, I think. But yeah, so connecting with something in the present moment in a positive way that means something to you, or even if it is just a simple distraction like painting your shoes. Now I kind of want to paint shoes because I actually have these patches on my bag that I started to paint, and I want to eventually finish these patches and paint them. I started it in the winter time, but since it's gotten warmer outside, I've been so distracted with other things that I haven't remembered to go back to this and paint it. But I do want to complete these at some point. But yeah, so literally painting something really random, such as patches on your damn bag, or, you know, whatever. I think that creative outlets are huge. And I don't truly believe that humans are not creative. I think even the most non-creative person can still find a way to be creative. And that's another thing too, is like, art takes many different forms. Just because your art doesn't look like Picasso or Monet or whoever, Da Vinci, like, that doesn't mean that that your art is bad inherently. That just means that is your art. And because you created it, you should feel proud of it. No matter what it looks like, no matter if it, you know, meets other people's standards for what art is considered. Like, we put so much restrictions on ourselves, and especially when it comes to creating things, expressing creativity, creating art. We're like, well, if it doesn't look like the Sistine Chapel, then I shouldn't even paint. But like, think about like the beautiful, wonderful painters that have a style completely of their own that look nothing like the Sistine Chapel. That if they believe that, like, oh, if it doesn't look like the Sistine Chapel, I shouldn't even bother. And it's like, but there are like so many artists throughout history that have their own specific style. Look at Van Gogh. A beautiful artist, like, so talented. The art is always, in my opinion, very beautiful. And it's like, could you imagine if he held himself to the same standards? Like, oh, if it's not like the Sistine Chapel, I should just give up and never create art again. We would be so deprived of all those wonderful pieces of art. And yeah, so I don't know why I got a little carried away with that. Probably because I feel like so many people constrain themselves when it comes to creation, creativity, art, and that is such a shame. Can you imagine all of the people right now that think that their art is not as good as others, and so they should just give up? Could you, like, can you imagine the impact those people's art could have on the world? The lives that could be changed because their art was put out into the world. Like, yeah, I just pretty much strongly believe in creation, creativity, expressing yourself through art or whatever. No matter if your art looks different or sounds different or whatever, it's still art. It's still your art. And that is valuable in and of itself. I also feel like my personal experience with creativity is like, in times of lack, that's when I really lean into my creativity, my desire to create, my desire to create art. Because I find that maybe it's specifically with the way that my brain works. I have like a very overactive mind, in my opinion. So in those moments of creation, I don't feel that sense of lack, because I feel like I have so many ideas inside of me at any given time that I have plenty of art projects to work on at any given moment. I have plenty of hobbies to do when I'm bored. I have plenty of video ideas to talk about. Like, you know, I don't know. I just feel like I wish that more people would do creative things without holding themselves to a stupid standard that is perpetuated by society at large. Because just a waste of time, and I mean, those standards are a waste of time. Holding yourself to those specific standards are a waste of time, because you could create something that is so moving so life-changing, so world-changing, and you may not even know it because you never created it, right? So I'm a big believer in that. Oh, but yeah, like if I start to feel like a sense of lack, and typically because I was born in poverty, I currently am living in poverty, to be quite honest. But you know, in those moments where, you know, maybe I look at my bank account and see that like there's barely anything in there, and you know, maybe I want to buy something for fun, you know, but in that moment maybe I don't have the funds to buy something for fun. But instead of lingering in that energy of like, I don't have the funds to do anything fun, that's, you know, I just feel so lacking and everything's unfair and, you know, whatever. I could do that, right? I could do that, but would that be beneficial to me in any way? No. Would that be beneficial to anyone else in any way? No. But if I instead take that moment and I think to myself, what could give me the feeling that is opposite to lack? Abundance. So if I want to feel abundant, if I want to create a sense of abundance in my mind, in my life, what can I tap into that helps me to feel that sense of abundance? And typically, for me, it's creating something. Because, you know, again, I have a lot of ideas up here. And I feel like I'm never in a sense of lack when it comes to my ideas, when it comes to my creations, when it comes to all of my different types of art, when it comes to me expressing myself in certain ways. Like, or sometimes connecting with nature. Even if I don't feel like I'm in the creativity sort of mindset, I find nature to be incredibly abundant. So when I'm feeling those sense of lack, sense of poverty, and that sense of lack that's attached to that, I can connect with other things that help me feel abundant or help tap me into that sense of abundance. And with manifestation specifically, part of the most important, pretty much the most important part is the mindset behind it. Because if you're living in a lack mindset, most likely you're only going to experience lack and more lack. But if you try to get your brain out of that sense of lack and into a mindset of abundance and doing things that create that sense of abundance, you can attract abundance. Another thing for me personally is like, love, romance. Like, say, I'm going through this time of being like single for years. Theoretically, right? Anyways, so say I've been single for years. And, I feel really bad about that. And I'm like, you know what? I feel like I'm really lacking in love. I haven't had any good romantic partners in so long. I'm tired of being single. I'm tired of doing everything alone. I can be in that mindset, right? And, that's not very helpful for me. That's not very helpful for anybody around me. Not to say that I should suppress those feelings. I think it's normal to feel those ways, right? And we can validate those things, but we don't have to linger and ruminate in them and marinate in that feeling. We can feel that feeling, let it come and go, and then what other things can I explore or tap into that will help make me feel a sense of love, or that I am loved? Maybe it's reaching out to a family member that maybe you haven't talked to in a long time, and they're going to be like super appreciative that you reached out to them. They're going to be like, oh my God, I've been waiting to hear from you. I love you so much. Yeah, that's a source of love right there. Maybe I feel love for nature, for the earth, so when I'm in nature, when I'm in, sitting on the ground, connecting with nature and stuff, I feel so much love. Maybe I see a cute little puppy on my way here and I give it pets and it jumps up on me. It looks so happy. It's so excited. It distracts me from all my worries. But I also feel that intense feeling of love when I interact with that puppy, right? Maybe there's neighborhood cats that maybe whenever I go to check my mail, there's always a cat that comes out to greet me, and I can just like pet him and love him, and it's like, oh my God, like yay. And it's like, yeah, you feel that sense of love. So you don't have to ruminate in that sense of like, oh, I'm lacking love and I'm never gonna experience love ever again in my life, and that's so sad. Like, yeah, we can experience those moments. I've experienced those moments many times in my life, but I try very hard not to stay in those moments because I like to move on with my life, right? And again, that energy also kind of doesn't aid in me being in this present moment, and it doesn't allow me to take full advantage of what we truly have, which is the present moment, because that's really all we have, right? We don't have tomorrow. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. Yesterday was yesterday. It's no longer here, right? So all we truly have is the present moment. And when we're thinking about these places in which we are lacking and we're staying in that energy, that's just no good for anyone. That's no good for you. That's no good for anyone around you. It's normal to experience those feelings of lack, but we do not have to stay in those mindsets of lack or those energies of lack. They're normal. You should definitely not feel ashamed for experiencing those feelings, because you are only human. Those are part of the human experience. But there are so many things you can tap into to give you that sense of what you want, but maybe it's in a different form, you know? So whether it be like in those moments of lack when it comes to my bank account, you know, I could, like say I look at my bank account, I have barely any money in there, and I'm super sad about that. But when I tap into my creativity and I start to draw or paint or whatever, I'm tapping into that mindset of abundance and stepping outside of that sense of lack. I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself at this point, but maybe I meant to make a different point, and I'll have to just edit that in there when I'm editing. But yeah, I think that this probably has been a pretty long episode. Not that I really have any specific time frame that I want these videos to be, but I don't want it to go on for hours and hours and hours, because most likely if it's super long, nobody's gonna watch it, but But I think that's probably the main points that I wanted to kind of mention in this. And again, you don't have to believe what I believe. You don't have to do what I do. You don't have to listen to any of this. You don't have to sit through the whole video. You don't even have to, I don't know. You don't have to do nothing. I'm not trying to convince you to do anything. I'm not trying to say that what you're doing is wrong. You need to do it my way in order for you to be successful or something. No, I'm just simply providing you with examples in my personal life that have personally worked for me to find that sense of peace and hope and all those fun things, right? So I think maybe this is a good place to kind of stop with, because like I said, and maybe it's pretty clear through these podcast episodes that I have a million ideas, thoughts, and all the time. So I could probably sit here and babble on for probably an eternity if I'm being so real. But my phone doesn't have the battery life for that. Anywho, I do have that like affirmation thing that I wanted to say at the end of these VT podcast episodes. There was like some sort of affirmation thingy that I had. I've written so much in here that I'm just like, dude, I don't know. Where is it? I have the affirmations. Where did I put them? Okay. No. I know that they are in here, unless the page fell out, but I don't think it did. Oh, I wrote down quotes at one point, so maybe I want to share those at some point. Oh, and I also want to share some of my poetry at some point, too. I write too damn much. I'm like, God damn it. Where is that? I literally had outro affirmations. Maybe I did accidentally rip it out of the book, because I am not the most organized person, and I kind of just shove things into bags like this, and so it's pretty apparent how those pages could suddenly disappear, and I could never find them again. See, I feel like yeah, I might have accidentally kinda. Well, I will try to remember what the outro was, the affirmations. I think I kind of just wanted to help you to feel like you are loved, you are supported, you matter. What you're doing here matters. Things will get better. I wish you nothing but positive energy, positive thoughts, positive feelings, positive outcomes. I think it was something along those lines. And then also, like, a reminder that if you show up in your most positive, highest self, doing the most good that you can do within your abilities, that means that the darkness does not win, because that darkness needs to be counteracted with some lightness. And if all of us are showing up as our best selves, we can counteract some of that darkness with our light. So it does matter how you show up, and your efforts do matter. Even if you don't see the results right away, they do matter. I wish to validate you on your feelings. Your feelings matter. Your ideas matter. Your art matters. Your creations matter. But more than that, you matter. And yeah. I also want to say that I love you and I support you. And thank you for watching this as well. I do appreciate you for being here. And I do hope that, my babbling, my ramblings somehow can help somebody. Even if it's just one person out there that's like, hey, you know what? Maybe I could do something like that. That's all I need, right? But yeah, thank you so much for being here. I love you so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next podcast episode on this channel. Until then, I'll see ya.